Happy New Year to you and to everybody else. I'm really glad to have us all together. This is a wonderful way to start the new year when we're all together. And I hope everybody is healthy and that your families are also. I want to introduce the topic of life tasks because it's a very important topic. Adler devoted a whole chapter to it in his book on social interest. So, life tasks are what the human community requires of each of us, according to Adler, and that benefits the larger human community. I want to introduce this topic by telling you some of the notes I have. By the early 1930s, Adler had developed an insightful and original theory of personality, which integrated social and individual concepts, and it was original, and it differed from all other theories of the time, and it still differs from all the theories today. During this time in history, when Adler developed his theory, there were two strong theoretical biases for understanding human behavior, and these still exist today. One of them was biological, and it emphasized that human actions, emotions, and motivation have biological determinants. The other emphasis at the time of Adler's life was social and basing it on social interactions as the basis for human action, emotion, and motivation. Freud's theory had a biological orientation, and Adler's was a social theory. Adler's theory said that social interactions were the basis for personality development. Freud's theory was that drives determined the individual's development, and these were biological, and it was deterministic because once the individual had those drives, that determined how the individual developed. And Adler had a cognitive social theory which said the child forms his own ideas based on social experiences. So Adler's was what was called a soft determinism, and that differed from Freud's theory, which had no relationship to the individual having concepts of life or of other people. It's not an accident that Adler talked about life tasks in his book on social interest, because he tied life tasks with social interest. For those of you who are new to these concepts, you have to read Adler's writings and Dreikurs's writings on social interest, which have to do with striving to contribute to the well-being of human beings in a larger world, not just in one's immediate world, but it certainly includes one's immediate world. So striving to contribute to the well-being of others was what Adler related life tasks to, and chapter 3 in his book talked about life tasks and how they related to social interests. For those of you new to Adlerian psychology, you should remember that Darwin had a terribly strong influence in the 19th century and still has today. And that gave a deterministic explanation for individuals' actions and development. And social theories did not have that. They put an emphasis on social patterns influencing an individual. There are many kinds of social theories, including Karl Marx, which put society in an economic perspective. But there were other social theories. In other words, sociology emerged in the 19th century, and it did not concern economics. And Adler's theory was part of the emphasis on social processes. Adler related social processes to individual development, and he emphasized the creativity of the individual in how he or she develops social concepts that are part of the lifestyle. If you do not know what lifestyle means, if you're new to Adlerian psychology, lifestyle is the self-created product of an individual. It relates to how the individual understands her own place in society. In the early years of childhood, the individual experiences social dynamics and comes to believe that she or he has a place in society, a certain kind of a place. Either that the person believes, I belong and I have value, and this is how I belong and how I have value. Or maybe the person believes, I don't have value and I only belong if I achieve certain kinds of relationships. So the lifestyle is the inner core of personality. And in the early years in the family, the child has certain expectations of others and of herself or himself. You need to read more in order to understand what lifestyle means. And many books of Adler and Dreikurs describe it. I'm not going to do that now, but I'm going to just emphasize for everybody that Adler believed that the life tasks reveal how the individual's lifestyle fits with life tasks. And Adler believed that 3 life tasks are basic for every individual because that's how the individual interacts with other human beings. The life tasks for Adler are intrinsically social. They reflect how the individual relates to the larger universe. Point 3 on the slide says, the greater our social interest, the more we deal effectively with the 3 life tasks, each of which involves human social relationships. And the 3 life tasks are friendship, work, and love. On point 4, I talk about friendships and work and love are the 3 life tasks that Adler focused on. He thought they capture the main obligations for each human, and he thought that a disturbance in life tasks shows some degree of pathology. Healthy lifestyles lead to functioning well in all 3 life tasks. And what that means is if you have high social interest, you do well in all 3 life tasks. If you see an Adlerian counselor or an Adlerian psychotherapist, it should be that the therapist or counselor in the diagnostic interview will assess how the client functions in all 3 life tasks. If the client functions in all 3 life tasks in a good way, that's encouraging because it shows that the person has good social interest and can solve problems in a healthy way. Adler focused on how humans support or negate each other, and this is how the individual develops. Adler talked about social concepts having to do with superiority strivings or inferiority feelings, and encouragement and discouragement. And these are all social concepts, and they deal with how the individual thinks or compares herself or himself to other human beings. And life tasks relate to that. If one functions well in all 3 life tasks, the individual has courage to have friends, courage to work well and responsibly, and to have long-term love relationships that are mutually supportive of each partner. For Adler, that was the key to healthy functioning. How individuals relate to each other represents their biases. People with high social interest want to contribute to the well-being of others and to support and encourage others. And those with low social interest are more concerned with their own status and well-being than with contributing to the well-being of others. In intimate relationships, they are more concerned with their own feelings of adequacy than with the feeling of adequacy of other people. And in the love relationship, that is particularly a strong motivation. It's not an all or none thing. For example, one person might have a bias. I will be encouraging to others who are nice to me or with whom I feel superior, but I will not be encouraging to those who treat me badly or to those with whom I do not feel superior. Many people have bias, and that's in their lifestyle. For Adler, that would not be an indication of meeting the life task well, because for Adler, we need to be able to have intimate relationships, love relationships that have a long life, and we need to be able to have a positive relationship with the other person, even when things do not go well. So Adler set high standards and believed social interest was necessary for the well-being of society. He recognized that an effective human being functions in constructive and encouraging ways in many circumstances. The person seeks to contribute to the well-being of the larger community and to the well-being of individuals with whom the person interacts, both in work and in friendship. The life task of work is how we contribute to the community in a constructive way. It's important to recognize that the child works by going to school, which prepares the child for skills later in productive work. So even children have life tasks in which they need to learn how to work in discipline and constructive ways. The other life task of being a friend and having friendships. This is important. It's well developed in children. Children have strong friendships and they reflect strong social interest. And this is also important in adulthood. Friends allow us to keep perspective and develop a system of mutual encouragement. In friendship, we have concern for another person and not only concern for oneself. This is important in the task of life, of love. And the person who is meeting the life task of intimacy and love shows a willingness to be vulnerable that's deeper than in friendship. So, intimacy and love test the individual's willingness to contribute in a way which the other two life tasks of work and friendship don't. For Adler, that was very important. The life task of love means it's a relationship of mutual support, of trust, mutual encouragement, and being willing to be vulnerable, and both partners to feel that. It was the deepest expression of social interest as far as Adler was concerned, to be willing to share at a deep emotional level with another human being. In Western countries, this is expressed in marriage and love, and it differs from the life task of friendship, both in terms of depth, of intimacy, and sharing. But each society has some equivalent of the concept of marriage, in which human beings are much more vulnerable and much more trusting to each other than in other relationships. The question that has come up with life tasks has to do with new life tasks that Mosak and Dreikurs wrote about. If you look at items 7 and 8 that I have on my slide, you see that in modern society, we have a lower amount of people who want to meet the life task of love in long-term, committed love relationships. At one time, young people were eager to enter into marriage, but statistics show this is not so true in contemporary time. Many young people do not want to enter long-term, committed love relationships. Adler would see that as a breakdown in the strength of society, because he believed in the strong family as necessary for the well-being of society. He emphasized that social relationships are what gives society its strength, and we need to work well in those social relationships. Bill Lennon published an article in 2020, which appeared in print, unfortunately, after his death. I was sorry that he didn't get to see his article in publication because he died in December of 2019. But I'm going to talk about his article because it expressed a viewpoint which I also share. He wrote about it as a philosopher, and I'm not a philosopher, so I wouldn't write that way, but I have the same ideas that he did in terms of the problems that arose because 2 articles came out. Dreikurs wrote one with Mosak in 1967, which talked about relationship to oneself. They called it a 4th life task, and it's important for one's well-being, but it's not a social relationship. And both Lennon and I believe this does not fit the character of Adler's life task and shouldn't be called a life task. The 5th life task, which Mosak wrote after my father died, and that was the one that was published in 2000. Adler considered as crucial for life task social interest, and the stronger that was, the more the person would function well. Spirituality is not like that. The article that was described as a 5th life task by Mosak, and he attached Dreikurs' name, and it does not belong in the same domain as Adler's life tasks. It is not dealing with social relationships. So Lennon pointed out that both the 4th and 5th life tasks, as described by Mosak and Dreikurs, don't fit what Adler was talking about because they don't deal with social relationships. It is not an accident that Adler devoted his whole chapter on life tasks in the book titled Social Interest. A limit in social interest limits the degree of healthy functioning in all three life tasks. It would not relate to the fourth and fifth life tasks. When Dreikurs wrote about the fourth life task, I know from a personal point of view that he was concerned with humans' evaluations of themselves. He had just published the book Social Equality in 1971, and he was concerned with self-evaluation, and he wanted humans to believe that they belong as equals in value with other human beings. Thus, when he talked about a fourth task, he emphasized that for healthy living, each human needs to trust and like herself or himself as being equal with other humans, having equal value. Social Equality book emphasized that one must like oneself and not be concerned with one's failings or mistakes. He had many years of psychiatric work in which he saw individuals who had psychopathology, and he saw how they had strong self-dislike and disrespect, and he wanted people to like themselves, to feel valued, and he was concerned with contribution to the well-being of others in the community, and he wanted people to have that social interest. And he saw that if people had high social interest, they tended to respect and like themselves and not dwell on failures or mistakes. So for him, the fourth life task referred to having self-respect as a basis in one's life. But as Lennon pointed out, that's not a social relationship. And therefore, the fourth life task, which Dreikurs wrote about and published in 1967 with Mosak, although it's important, it's not a life task in the same way that Adler talked about it. And we have to keep that in mind. Mosak had strong religious views, and so when he wrote about the fifth life task, as he called it, he put an emphasis on the cosmos, and that's not a social relationship. I don't know if Dreikurs had read that manuscript and had agreed to it before he died. He died in 1972, and this was published in 2000. So I don't know if he agreed that he should have his name on the manuscript which Mosak published, but I do know he didn't have that same idea, and that he was much more concerned the way that Adler was in social relationships. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to discuss it with him, but I agree with what Bill Lennon wrote, that it shouldn't be included with Adler's life tasks because these are intrinsically social and not cosmic. When Adler wrote about life tasks, in the book on social interest, he said a limit in social interest would limit the degree of healthy functioning in all three life tasks. The person might have friends and a solid marriage, but not be effective at work, or a person might be effective at work and with friends, but not have a long-term love relationship. So needing to have solid life tasks, all three of them, was essential for Adler. And we have to think about it in terms of modern life, whether that still fits. In my view, it still fits, even though the challenges are severe. People get discouraged about friendships or love or work, and they need help in increasing their social interests in order that they can function well in all three life tasks. I hope all of you who are with me today have followed what I was trying to share with you. And I'd like to be sure that everybody understood what I was talking about. So let me finish and say thank you, everybody, for listening with me. And I hope everybody feels more encouraged about fulfilling their own life tasks. Thank you for being with me, and my best wishes to everybody.